How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to take it back to 2018, I think was the last time I did one of these videos, and talk to you about 5 cheap and fun substitutes for very expensive and more aggressive cars. And now back in 2018 I made a formula to work out how close by stats a cheap car was to an expensive car, and here's that formula.
I've actually created a basic formula for ordering this top 5 in a fair way that doesn't just cater to my bias towards Audis. The horsepower and 0 to 60 times are compared between the cheap car and the expensive car it replaces to find the difference. The 0 to 60 difference is then taken as a numerical value and multiplied by 100 to make it similar to the horsepower figures. These figures are then added together, and the cheap car with the lowest figure after all this is therefore the closest in terms of out and out raw speed and power to its expensive counterpart. Hopefully that makes sense to you.
So yeah, literally throwing it all the way back to 2018 JB there, that is basically 4 years ago at this point. So with that in mind, remember that I'm in the UK, so prices in other countries may differ, and don't forget, whenever you buy any second-hand car, maintenance, repairs, insurance, road tax, all that good stuff is important to remember. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If this video hits 1,000 likes, I will do the same video again at under £5,000 instead. Subscribe as well if you're new here. Without further ado, let's get into the video.
The Jaguar F-Type SVR is an absolute monster, and a very pretty one too, designed by the same man that designed legends like the Aston Martin DB9, Ford Escort Cosworth, Ford RS200 and the Nissan R390 race car. It has a 5-litre supercharged V8 engine that produces 566 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in just 3.5 seconds, but more importantly, it sounds unreal, with the Jaguar sound development team testing over 50 different exhaust iterations before finally settling on its ultra crackly and aggressive exhaust notes. It's a proper supercar in my books, with a top speed of over 200 miles per hour. Plus, it's the fastest and most powerful road-going Jaguar ever produced. But with that in mind, it does come with one key downside. It's pretty expensive, with prices starting at around £125,000 when new, which is well out of reach for the vast majority of us. But you know what else was designed by Ian Callum, has a V8 engine, although sadly not supercharged? The second generation Jaguar XK, which is a 4.2-litre V8 that puts out 300 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5.9 seconds. Now I sadly couldn't get you into an XKR at the 10k mark, which would have also given you that supercharger and up the performance to be closer to that hallowed SVR, but we're on a budget here so we have to make do. The F-Type is actually listed as an indirect successor to the XK, being Jaguar's next sports car. Not only that, the F-Type actually sits on a shortened version of the XK's platform, and the two share some similarities in terms of design, as both cars were designed with the legendary E-Type in mind. Of course, the F-Type is the more exotic car, and there are far more exotic versions of the XK as well, but again, budget. Considering you can get the V6 F-Type for under £30,000 already, the XK still remains 1/3 of the cost. Plus, it's a pretty luxury Grand Tourer for the money, with a plush interior that may be a bit dated by today's standards, but still offers you a comfortable place to waft around in. These start at around £6,000, and for 10k you'll get a 2006 model with around 100,000 miles on it. There are known problems with electrics on these, with some having battery failures out of nowhere, as well as water pumps and the general cooling system failing. The tyre pressure management system can also go wrong, but for its time, the actual engine in these is pretty good. I was in Brighton the other day and I saw a new G82 BMW M4 competition out in the wild for the first time, driving through the lanes. I'd seen the M3 equivalent before when Steph took it down to Caffeine and Machine, but I've always preferred coupes, and seeing this M4 in the flesh really got me going. It both looks and sounds aggressive, particularly with the M Performance carbon fibre and exhaust parts optioned on, and I would say it's one of the most exotic looking BMWs available right now. It's no secret that I love an M4. If you haven't seen my review on the F-Series M4, do go check that out, but sadly this new G82 starts at £75,000, which is well above what many of us can reasonably afford. That said, it is an unreal car, with its 3-litre twin turbocharged inline 6 that makes 502 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 3.8 seconds. Now the E92 BMW 335i doesn't perform quite as well as the M4 and doesn't look as good in my opinion, but it's still an absolute beast for under 10k, even if there have been some reliability concerns over the years. Like the M4, it has a 3-litre twin turbocharged inline 6, but instead it makes 301 brake horsepower and will get to 60 in 5.2 seconds. But it does cost a whole lot less, starting at around £5,000, with £10,000 netting you a 2008 model with around 60,000 miles on the clock. Not bad at all. That means at its cheapest, it's 15 times cheaper than the M4, but I'll leave it up to you to decide whether the M4 is 15 times better. In order to have something M4-esque, I would go for the E92 Coupe or E93 convertible, and I would say that that convertible has something over the M4, a hard top roof, instead of the soft top that BMW have reverted to on the M4. In fact, the E93 was BMW's first model to use a retractable hardtop, and I personally really like it. This does however come from many people's least favourite era of BMW interiors, and of course, like the XK, it's a little bit out of date when compared to today's cars, but I actually think it's aged relatively well, and externally I think it's a really good looking car, maintaining sporty looks and not being too boring. Plus, on top of all of that, it's a great platform for anyone that fancies a bit of modification, and just a stage 1 will get up to 380 brake horsepower. Sadly, it's not known for reliability though, and I'll just list the key problems here. High pressure fuel pump failure, turbocharger failure, leaky fuel injectors, charge pipe failure, valve cover oil leaks, carbon buildup, Vanos failure, and water pump failure. Is it a supercar or a supercar killer? Let me know in the comments what category you think the Nissan GT-R falls into, as Nissan believe it's a supercar, while I've seen many videos talking about it being a competitor to supercars in terms of its pace. And that pace is indisputable, with its 3.8 litre twin turbocharged V6 putting out 471 brake horsepower, which takes to 60 in 3.4 seconds, and that's in its most basic spec too. Go for one of the more expensive and aggressive specs and you'll get to 60 under 3 seconds, which is unbelievable for a 4-seater. Irrespective of what category it falls into, the GT-R is a well-loved exotic that shares its lineage with legends like the Skyline GT-R, and it's unbelievably quick from a track perspective, setting a time of 7 minutes and 24 seconds around the Nürburgring in 2012 in wet conditions, which is just ridiculous, considering the standard for high-performance cars around the ring is sub 7 minutes in the dry. The Nissan 370Z may not be quite the track monster when not in Nismo spec, but with a Nürburgring time of 8 minutes and 11 seconds, it's still a great little sports car with some track pedigree. It also shares its platform with the GT-R, and the engine isn't too dissimilar overall, a 3.7 litre V6 that makes 326 brake horsepower and will do 0 to 60 in 5.1 seconds despite lacking those twin turbochargers. It replaced the 350Z, and though they are aesthetically quite similar, they are totally different in terms of parts with a complete redesign and overhaul. The designer, Randy Rodriguez, had Shark Week on TV while sketching up the car, and so took design principles from Sharks to make the car look as aggressive as possible. He also took inspiration from Sprinters, as he wanted the car to look muscular without looking bulky, and Sprinters are generally pretty lean. All in though, it's a really nice car for a bit of grand touring, with that V6 being renowned for great low-end torque, and it makes a good sound too. This is the most expensive car on the list though, starting at around £9,000, and for 10k you'll get a 2011 model with anywhere between 90,000 miles to 100,000 miles on the clock. There are some known problems with these, from fuel starvation to failure of the concentric slave cylinder, which basically flares up with a constantly stuck down clutch pedal. Some owners have also complained about high oil consumption, so worth asking the question.
So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. As a reminder, do hit the like button. 1,000 likes, I'll do this at under £5,000 instead, and I might even do another £10,000 video because I can do more than 5 cars on this topic. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well, it is much appreciated.
I recently had the incredible opportunity to drive the 992 Porsche Turbo S, which was an absolute weapon out on track, so I can only imagine how much fun the 718 Cayman GT4 would be, which was built to be a track-focused beast. Everything about it is made to be good on track, and though we have more recently seen the introduction of the even more aggressive GT4 RS, the GT4 remains the best currently readily available Cayman GT product. That rear wing, for example, creates 150 kilograms of downforce, which is 50% more than the 981 GT4 that preceded it. That's probably a good thing, as Porsche specialists that I've spoken to have all agreed that the 718 has better turn-in grip than the 981. Either way, if you're after a track-focused, fun car to rival the Lotus Exige, this is basically it, with its 4-litre flat-6 engine that makes 414 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 4.3 seconds. Now, the Porsche Boxster 986 S isn't a track-focused beast, even though it has been used in some one-make race series around the world, but considering it's an ancestor to the 718 Cayman GT4 and has its own allure to it, I thought it would be worth throwing in as a potential substitute, with its 3.2-litre flat-6 engine that makes 260 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 5.5 seconds. Now, the engine should come as no surprise considering Porsche's love for flat-6 engines, but the 986 Boxster S, as I've discussed in previous videos, is more than the sum of its parts. It's an appreciating classic with a pretty good history to it. Porsche did quite a few things in the 1990s that helped to save their brand, and the Boxster was a big part of that, as it came to deal with the low sales of the 928 and was built to be a new cheap sports car from Porsche that more people could afford. It was also one of the first first cars to arrive after Porsche took advice from Toyota to share parts between cars, cutting their costs significantly and bringing about a new and far more profitable era for the business. That's why you'll see parts from the 996 911 dotted around this Boxster. Now the GT4 costs around £75,000 the minimum, but the 986 S starts anywhere from around £6,000, with 10 grand getting a 2002 model with around 60,000 miles on it. Cylinder bore cracking and IMS failure are the well-known problems with these, but the former usually happens before the car hits 50,000 miles, if at all, and the latter is actually rarer than most people make out. Plus you can replace all relevant parts with stronger ones for peace of mind if preferred. The Maserati Granturismo cost a minimum of around £95,000 new on its final year in 2019, leading up to over £125,000 for the most savage examples like the MC Stradale, which had more horsepower, less weight, and more ridiculous features to make it as angry and exotic as possible. That includes Formula 1 technology to reduce friction in the engine and derive more horsepower, which is pretty nuts, as well as more intakes and more useful splitters for greater aero and downforce, plus the carbon ceramic brakes with improved cooling ducts over the standard car. It's such a rogue car as it's taking the grand tour that is the Granturismo and making it as close to a supercar as Maserati dare. The idea behind it in fact was that existing Granturismo customers wanted a car that looked and felt like the Granturismo race cars used in the GT4, GTD and Super Trofeo championships, and this is what they came up with. A Ferrari 4.7 litre V8 engined monster which puts out 453 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 4.4 seconds, pretty rapid. What I personally love about the car is how it sounds, as Maserati often do an excellent job of making their cars sing. Another Maserati that sings pretty nice is the Maserati Coupe, which is a far cheaper and more reasonable car considering it still has a derivative of that same Ferrari Maserati engine, just as a 4.2 litre V8 producing 390 brake horsepower and managing 0 to 60 in a still ridiculously solid time of 4.8 seconds, just 0.4 slower than the MC Stradale. What makes it even better is that despite being a 2+2, it can actually fit adult passengers in the rear, which means more people to take on your nice long grand touring trips around the continent. Plus, it was literally the predecessor to the Granturismo, so it has a similar overall idea, despite maybe not being quite as inspired by race cars or exotic cars or whatever. It still comes with either a manual or paddle shift, and though both externally and internally it's far more dated, it is a bit of a classic already in some circles. These start at around £8,000, and for 10 grand you get a 2004 model with around 75,000 miles on it. Clutch wear on both paddle shifts and standard manuals is a known issue on these, and it's a pretty expensive fix. The cam cover is also known to weep oil, and the F1 gearbox pump can go, which costs a small fortune to replace. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button as I said, and subscribe as well if you're new. Apologies if I look a bit bedraggled. I have been sick for the past few days. If you watched my last video, you'll have seen that I was actually just getting sick during that video, and yeah, I had to take some time off work, etc. and be sick, so now I am reeling in the impacts of it. But with all that aside, mass thanks to the patrons always for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. I will see you in the next one.
Listen.